Welcome to The Fine Year, a month-by-month YouTube presentation about a birding big year I made in 2019, where everything turns out just fine. This presentation covers June, where I made my first ever visit to North Dakota, also birded in Maine and here in California. This photo is from North Dakota. I use it in a number of birding presentations because I like the feel of it. North Dakota seemed to be an inviting place with a road open to adventure. So let's go have some. I hadn't been home long from my May travels before I headed out to North Dakota. I had almost joined a tour for that trip, but I decided it would be more fun to go on my own. I read various blogs and eBird reports and decided to start off at Mackenzie Slough. I wasn't looking for rarities so much, just North Dakota birds that I would not easily find elsewhere. Right away, I found black terns in what seemed to be a nesting area, with parents collecting food over a wetland and carrying it back to their chicks. I was happy to see this Wilson's phalarope in breeding plumage. This was the female. The male may have been hidden somewhere sitting on the nest. These are role reversal birds, one of the few where the female is the boldly colored one and the male sits on the eggs. There were a large number of killdeer in this area. Though these are common and I'd seen many already this year, they're usually active and fun to watch, for more than just their beauty. Here was my first lifer of the trip, the clay-colored sparrow. I should be embarrassed, I had not seen any before. Sparrows are not my strong point. These birds were active, both singing and feeding, as evidenced by the dragonfly in its mouth. We get a few yellow-headed blackbirds in California, but nothing like the numbers I saw on this trip. Many had staked out territories and were displaying from the tops of the reeds. Both marsh wrens and sedge wrens were singing, but from different habitats in the marsh. The marsh wrens, like this one, were in the greener, wetter areas, while the sedge wrens were in the drier, browner areas. Northern shovelers were common in the marsh ponds. This male posed well for me. The ones in winter in California always seem to have their heads underwater. Northern pintails are such pretty birds. I'm not sure I could call it the most pretty duck, but it certainly is the most elegant-looking duck. Marbled godwits behaved much differently than they do in California in the winter. Here in California, they are on migration and spent all their time on the shore feeding. Here in North Dakota, it was surprised to see them calling from the tops of telephone poles, like this one. One North Dakota bird I wanted to see in particular was the upland sandpiper. I found my lifer driving on the Long Lake auto tour route. He was standing on a fence post. The car made an excellent blind as I got its photograph. I had seen my lifer Franklin's gull in Mexico earlier in January, but these were my U.S. lifers, so they're now included in my count. They're in full breeding plumage too, unlike the one in Mexico. I'd gotten a canvas back with my daughter in February, but at too long a distance to get good photos. The ones I saw here were both closer and more colorful due to it being breeding season. American goldfinches are common in many locations, but this was probably the best photo I got of one this year. I used to love these coming to our feeders when I was a boy in Indiana. I enjoyed seeing this white-faced ibis. Once again, the ones in winter in California tend to be browner, not as colorful or striking. Sometimes redheads make it down to Bolsa Chica in the winter, but I don't see them there every year. This pair made for a nice photo. J. Clark Salyer was one of the best wildlife refuges I visited all year. This dark bird took me by surprise when it flew up from the grass, but I realized it must be a longspur. Again, my phone app came to the rescue, and I identified my first chestnut-colored longspur. I ended up seeing numerous ones at this refuge. Moving from refuge to refuge, I went to Horsehead Lake to look for some of the more difficult sparrows. These eastern kingbirds monitored my every move. I could not manage to get the Nelson sparrow with my camera, but I was able to capture the Lecantes. The Lecante sparrow seemed slightly more likely to sit higher in the grass and perhaps sing. while the Nelson sank deep into the grass, occasionally popping up for a display fight before sinking back in. As with the Godwits, this Wilson snipe was displaying from plain sight on a fence post, very different from the winter skulkers in California. I did not stop at the Chase Wildlife Refuge, which has a huge white pelican breeding colony. I did, however, capture this nice one at the nearby Arrowwood Refuge. That refuge did not have quite the variety of some of the others, although I did not arrive there until afternoon, so I'm sure that affected the result. After a long week in North Dakota, I returned home. My trip to Maine was not scheduled until the end of the month, so I had some time in the middle to explore California. I decided to make a trip up to Mono Lake, a key breeding location for California gulls. Ospreys also breed in Mono Lake, building nests on the tufas. Some years I have seen as many as 4 nests from the South Shore. Interestingly, there are no fish in Mono Lake. It is similar to the Great Salt Lake in Utah. The osprey fly to the lakes in the nearby eastern Sierras to catch fish for their young. You may have noticed the small bird flying near the osprey nest in the previous picture. That was a violet-green swallow, who also nest on the exposed tufas at Mono Lake. Mono Lake is a great spot for a few other dry habitat birds. Sagebrush sparrows are easier to find here than other places I have been. This Bullock's oriole was found at the city park on the north side of Mono Lake. That's a nice park with some birds not found on the drier south side. I can usually find the orioles, western tanagers, and yellow and Wilson's warblers here. My original intent had been to get to some of the lakes above the Mammoth Ski area, but the road above town was closed due to heavy snow and timber falls during the winter. I decided to drive up to Rock Creek Lake south of town to find some mountain birds. This olive-sided flycatcher obliged me. I found Cassin's finches and western wood pewees on the hike above Rock Creek Lake, but those photos are not very good. This singing, warbling vireo did its best to make up for that. Finally, it was time to head for Maine. My plan was to take a boat trip to Egg Rock for the Atlantic puffin and hopefully pick up some other alcids and seabirds on the trip. Investigating pelagic trips from the East Coast convinced me that if I did medium well on the Maine trip, a separate East Coast trip would not be worth the cost. This great black-backed gull was my official greeter to Maine, near my hotel. I ended up doing fairly well on the Egg Rock trip. These great shearwaters were on my hoped-for list, and I was glad to find them. The Wilson storm petrels flew surprisingly close to the boat, and I was able to get decent pictures of them as well. I wasn't quite as lucky with the northern gannets. Although I saw 2, they were immatures and quite some distance away. I had wanted to see some male eiders this year, and these common eiders filled the bill. I had only seen gray female eiders in other locations. I saw several black guillemots, as well as a few razorbills and murres. For some reason, only the black guillemots would come close enough for a decent photo. Here are the stars of the trip, Atlantic puffins. It was raining by the time we got to Egg Rock, but the rain was not too hard, and the birds continued their behavior, fishing for their young or monitoring their nests. Terns on Egg Rock were even more active than the puffins. There were 3 species there, common, Arctic, and roseate terns. The mate on the boat helped me differentiate between their calls, which made identification easier of the similar flying terns. We couldn't get too close to the island, much less land on it for environmental restrictions. This common tern was one of the few who flew close enough to the boat for a decent photo. Besides the Egg Rock trip, I did not find many places to bird near Booth Bay Harbor. I finally settled on Scarborough Marsh. Although I did not see any new birds there for the year, I did find willets, egrets, and sharp-tailed sparrows. This snowy egret was one of my photos from that morning. Mostly to the credit of North Dakota, June was a good month for my fine year numbers. My life birds number jumped up to 78, making 100 seem like a possibility again. My total bird count was up to 492, making my 525 goal seem low, but still not approaching the next milestone of 600. I visited a wide variety of habitats from the prairies and grasslands of North Dakota to the coast of Maine to the mountains of California. Besides the birds, part of the joy of a big year is visiting and experiencing the beauty of our country. As June drew to a close, my wife and I were beginning to be excited about the trip to Churchill, Canada, in July. My bird count might take a little hit, but I was confident the experience would be worth it.